Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, I'm going to be making a video about a recent bit of body camera footage that we obviously has been making the rounds now, and that is the death of Senior Airman Roger Fortson. Okay, very terrible shooting. A lot of things going on in terms of breaking down what happened in this incident and everything like that. Dean Weingarten over at AmmoLand wrote an article, a bit of an expose. I'm going to include a link to that in the bio here, down below, in the description box, rather. And I am going to read some excerpts from his article, but I'm sure many of you have seen the video. The body camera footage is floating around, and it's a pretty terrible situation. I mean, look, there's a lot of different opinions floating around about this. So we're going to kind of break it down. I'm going to give you my take on it, and we're going to get into the weeds on this. Before we do, I would like to thank our friends at CMMG for supporting today's video. If you're looking for anything in the AR category, they are your go-to source. They got some awesome stuff in the hybrid realm. I love the Anvil, their 458 SOCOM. Of course, their Mutant, also known as the Mark 47. I'm always going to call it the Mutant, but they have their bufferless descent line, some really awesome bufferless 9mm. Their 22 conversion kits are amazing. So check them out, CMMG, and tell them that Eric sent you. And a big thanks to them for supporting our efforts here on the channel. So I'll just read a few excerpts from this. Body cam shows police shoot an armed man in his home. Interesting. And of course, the photo here shows the what led up to the incident. And here we see Roger Fortson holding a pistol, and the deputy, unfortunately, shoots Mr. Forston. Okay, let's just get a little bit of background here, and we'll get into this. At about 4:28 p.m. on May 3rd, 2024, in Okaloosa County, Florida, deputy sheriff responded to a domestic violence call from an apartment complex. A few minutes later, the deputy shot and killed Senior Airman Roger Fortson after Forston opened his apartment door in response to the deputy's demands. The incident has gone viral. Forston's family has hired controversial lawyer Ben Crump. Crump has made statements that the shooting was at the wrong apartment, and Forston was shot as he walked away from the door, and deputies burst into the apartment. Crump wrote that Forston grabbed his legally owned gun and was shot as he was walking back to the living room as deputies burst through the door. The Okaloosa County Sheriff released the body camera at a press conference, and here's a synopsis of what this correspondent saw in the video. A woman at the complex directed the deputy sheriff to apartment 1401 based on information she had received from another woman. Now, I'm not going to go through every little detail, but basically this Karen of a lady said, well, there's domestic disturbance going on, and she calls the sheriff out there and gives them an apartment number, based on what she had heard from another woman. So not even information that she apparently witnessed herself, but information that she simply heard from someone else and wanted to report it. Well, as you would know, the deputy proceeded to the apartment. He listened for several seconds at the apartment, knocked on the door, moved out of the vulnerable area. Of course, there's a fatal funnel. You don't want to stand in a doorway. So usually when police knock, they'll knock and then step aside. Many view that tactic as being a little, unsafe for the occupant because, obviously, if you can't look out the door and see who's knocking at the door, you're going to be a little suspicious. However, I can understand why law enforcement obviously doesn't want to stand in the fatal funnel. Obviously, bullets can travel through walls and doors quite easily. I digress. Point is, understand where the mindset of this guy's at. He's just trying to get out of the fatal funnel. He's just doing things by the book, okay? The deputy moves in front of the door, knocks loudly, and announces himself. He demands the door be opened. He knocks again, loudly announcing himself and demanding the door be opened. The door is opened partially. The deputy commands step back. As Roger Fortson complies and steps back, the video reveals that he has a handgun in his hand held down at his side. As Forston is complying, the deputy fires 5 shots, rapid fire, and Forston falls down, dropping the handgun. After Forston is on the floor, the deputy commands drop the gun, drop the gun. The commands to drop the gun are given after Forston is down and on the floor, having dropped the gun while he's been shot. So there are contradictions between what Ben Crump wrote and what is shown in the body camera video. Now, obviously, those contradictions don't mean that the deputy was justified in the shooting of Forston. The body camera video does not look good for the deputy. So of course, this goes into detail. I'm not going to give every little detail. I'm going to let you guys read through the article yourselves because I don't want this video to be terribly long. But essentially, there's a bit of information that was correlated to 911 through this girlfriend and some other background information that gives a little bit better of a story. Of course, this is the same sheriff's department that had the acorn incident. All right, you guys might recall some acorns fell on top of a patrol car, and these guys opened fire thinking they were being shot at. So this sheriff's department already has a bit of a reputation for being a little trigger happy. Okay, this isn't the first time this has happened. Now, I would imagine that this deputy is going to be in some pretty deep water because I'm going to try to look at this from both sides of the perspective. And look, nobody in a million years ever wants to play Monday quarterback. Nobody likes that guy, right? If you weren't the one knocking on the door and you weren't the one answering the door, then ultimately you don't know what thoughts and emotions and feelings were going through those people's minds at the time, right? Was Forston justified in having his gun when he answered the door? Well, heck yeah. If someone knocks at my door and steps aside the peephole and I live in an apartment complex, I think it's safe to say that that person wants to be avoided, right? And it could be a criminal. All right. If someone announces that they are law enforcement, is that simply enough reason to assume they are law enforcement? Not so much, right? Criminals can easily say sheriff's department loudly and boldly and with authority and make you think that they are the police. And then, of course, we've seen in many verified situations where criminals have used the cover of law enforcement, trying to make someone think they're law enforcement to gain entry and get the upper hand in a robbery or a crime of some sort. So that's happened before. So, while the deputy was trying to do everything he could by the book leading up to that moment, I think ultimately what ended up happening was the deputy saw the handgun and got scared, and we don't know what was going through that guy's mind. And of course, I am not going to sit here and say that the shooting was justified. Heck no. It was not a justified shooting. I mean, the deputy should have kept his calm and maybe acted a little different, maybe gave the guy a little bit of a chance. But, I think the perspective that many people are going to have on this is that Forston was justified in having a gun answering the door because he didn't know who the heck was really at the door. And by the time he cracked the door and the deputy essentially sort of forced entry and forced him back, it was already too late. I mean, what was he going to do? He already had the gun in his hand, which justifiably you would have a weapon in your hand to check the door if someone's banging at your door and making demands and you don't know who they are and you can't see them through, the peephole or anything like that. But then the deputy is like, well, crack open the door and there's a dude holding a gun. So it's like, what do? Do you give him a chance to point the gun at you and shoot you? Or in that split second moment, what do? If you see the gun and all you think is, oh my gosh, I'm fearing for my life, thinking this guy's about to pop one right in my face, right? I'm not saying that the deputy was justified. I'm simply breaking down the way that both parties would likely see the situation. What this essentially is a very tragic situation. This is a member of our military, right? This guy serves his country, upstanding guy, not a terrible dude, serving in the Air Force, likely just answering the door, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, figure out who's beating at his door. This is tragic and it's terrible. And it does paint a very ugly stain on law enforcement and the way this was handled, especially this particular sheriff's department who has a history of being trigger happy over some really mundane things. So, I've heard people argue this both ways. I've heard people say that the deputy was justified in the shooting because he saw the gun and feared for his life. I've seen people say that, well, Forston had every right to have his gun on him, and just because a law enforcement officer is at your door, that doesn't mean that you can't be armed or whatever. So, I'm of the school of thought that I just think this is a really terrible situation. I want to bring light to it because I think that, cops need better training, and they certainly need to have, utilize their verbal judo, okay? And was the verbal judo employed in this situation? You're going to tell the guy to drop the gun after you already freaking shot him? Isn't it a little bit too late to try to de-escalate the situation when you've already launched 5 rounds into somebody? Was it just that he said what he said to cover himself and make it seem as if he tried to de-escalate the situation when clearly you went straight to lethal force without even trying to apply any form of verbal judo at all, right? You didn't even give the guy a chance to drop the gun. You shot him before you even told him to drop the gun. Now, Forston obviously was not acting in an aggressive manner. He was not pointing the gun at the officer. He was not pointing the gun. He didn't even have his finger on the trigger. He had the gun at his side, pointed down, which, if we are investigating a bump in the night and we have our gun down at our side and someone shines a flashlight and sees you holding your gun at your side, that's kind of universally accepted that that's a non-threatening gesture. Just like having a rifle at the low and ready and a soldier's on patrol walking around, or you're walking around at a rally or doing whatever and you got your gun at the low and ready, that's the universally accepted sign that, hey, I'm low and ready, I'm ready to use my rifle, but my rifle's just here. I've got it low and ready and secure. Same thing can be said for a handgun. If I've got my handgun down at my side, pointing at the ground, finger off the trigger, especially in the video, it does appear that it's at a slightly backward angle as well. Almost as if not only is he wanting to have the gun down, but also pointed sort of to the rear a little bit. And that, in my mind, when I look at it from a trained person's perspective, someone who handles guns, like he's obviously in the Air Force, so he handles guns at least to some degree. I'm assuming he has some sort of pistol training as well. Obviously, that is a much more universal sign of, hey, not only am I, not aggressive and not intending to point my gun at anybody, but I'm also sort of, slightly pointing this thing to the rear. That way, hey, it's just even more to let you know that not only is the gun down, but it's a bit to the rear. And that's kind of telling you, hey, just in case, to be safe, I'm letting you know that my gun is purposely further back than it needs. There's a lot of ways you could spin it in terms of trying to justify how Forston acted in that moment. And there's a lot of ways you could spin it to justify how the deputy acted in that moment. At the end of the day, it's very tragic, and I wish that it would have worked out a different way, because right now, look, people are at each other's throats in a lot of different ways in our society right now. There's a lot of things going on that people aren't happy about, and folks are not happy with the police, okay? Right? And look, at the end of the day, the police have some really major PR problems to try to work through. And, look, there's lots of good cops that are quitting left and right because they're tired of all this crap, the mud being slung at them. They're tired of the way society paints law enforcement. So a lot of people are saying, see ya, and they're retiring early. And a lot of those guys tend to be your more experienced, guys and things like that. So, you wind up getting a lot of trigger-happy people, and because of all the disdain in the media and things that get spread around about law enforcement and this sort of, and much of it justified, by the way, okay? Law enforcement, as a result, they're going to be a little bit more on their toes because they think that society's walking around with a chip on their shoulder intrinsically. Or perhaps it's that where these guys police is a rough area, and maybe they are used to having guns pointed at them on a regular basis. So the context of the entire situation has to be taken into account to come up with a logical view of what led up to what happened and how it could have maybe went differently. I mean, is the crime in that area high? Have those deputies had similar run-ins before, maybe in that same apartment complex? Has that deputy been on a call recently where he had to draw his pistol in a similar situation, and now he's drawing off of muscle memory from something he's had to do before that was justifiable? So see, there's all these things you have to consider. And I'm not saying that there's any justification for shooting a guy simply for having a gun at the low and ready. And, it's a sticky situation. It's a tricky situation. And I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers or know what should have been done in that moment. Because as I said, nobody likes a Monday quarterback. Nobody. I wasn't there. Only Forston and that deputy know what was going through their head at that moment. And all we have is the body camera footage to give us a bit of a glimpse of to what led up to it. I mean, we see it black and white, what happened. All we can really do is try to learn from the situation and try not to repeat these types of mistakes. I certainly don't think there was some ill or malicious intent on the part of the deputy. However, I also think that Forston absolutely intended no ill harm to anyone, and I think he was just simply being well prepared, as any good soldier or airman would be. If you're answering the door and there's some mysterious person yelling demands that you don't know what's going on and you have to assess the situation, your military training is going to kick in, and you're obviously going to make sure you have a way to protect yourself in that moment. So both of these people did essentially what they thought was best in that moment and what they were trained to do in that moment. And unfortunately, it involved Forston dying. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. I mean, obviously, the family is going to sue the ever-living crap out of these people in civil court. It's not over. So there's still a lot to talk about with that and to see what comes to light. But I wanted to talk about this because it is something that a lot of people in the Second Amendment community think about on a regular basis. They think, hey, what in the heck could ever happen? What if this happened to me? What if I have to deal with law enforcement knocking at the door? I mean, what do I do? What should I do? I mean, he could have just not answered the door, right? If they don't have a warrant, y'all, they can knock all they want. They can yell all they want. They can want to talk to you all they want. But if they don't have a warrant, they have no justification for entering your abode at all. If they have a warrant, don't worry. They're going to kick the door in if they have a warrant. Now, they might give you a warning and say, Sheriff's Department, search warrant, boom, and kick the door in. In that case, well, if there's a warrant, there's a warrant. But if there ain't a warrant and it's just a knock and talk and they're just trying to get information, don't answer the damn door. Just don't answer, right? Lock the door. Don't freaking answer. I mean, that in that situation is probably the best thing that Forston could have done. If he knew that, you know, that he was not in the wrong and there was no reason to answer the door. You know, if someone is banging loudly at the door and wants in, well, just don't let him in. I mean, that was totally an option. Now, of course, he was going the alpha male route and going, well, who was banging at my cave door? I get it. I understand. But in that moment, if you suspect that it's a law enforcement encounter and you have second thoughts about how it might go down and you don't feel safe, well, then don't answer the door. That's an option, y'all, okay? So just keep it in the back of your mind. You know, when you're dealing with all this kind of stuff, I mean, it's scary. We hate to see these things happen. It's very tragic. I don't believe that Roger Fortson was, you know, meant anyone any sort of ill intent or any harm. I think that deputy certainly had a bad day. I'm sure he's very much regretting what happened. I'm sure he's not proud of it. So it's unfortunate. We'll see how it all pans out. But I wanted to share this, and thank you all so much for tuning in to today's video. I've got a lot more stuff on the way. I apologize. I've been taking a little bit of time off lately to handle a few things, but I'm back trying to get some videos done. I've got a bunch of range videos coming up, y'all. Some really cool guns that I got in for review. Also some more 5 guns and some gripes. Lots of things coming down the line. We're filming like crazy when we can, so I really appreciate your patience with that, and many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.